see if we can get this in one take. Right. So let's talk about the amendments. First, we started about the articles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got all those memorized? Perfect. Can you tell? I ate my Wheaties. I have a piece of tape on my shirt. I don't really know why. Shiny. Ooh. Anywho, so today we're going to focus on the amendments. That is the second section of the Constitution, right? So an amendment, the root word of that is to amend, which means to change, right? The Constitution isn't perfect. When it was created, we knew that there were things in there. We know that there were things in there that we needed to correct and we needed to adjust. But how do we really go about doing that? That's where the amendments come in. Every amendment inside the Constitution is a change of the Constitution. It's taking something that was created and saying, we need to adjust it because it doesn't really meet the needs of the society at the moment. It's kind of like a progressive tool to kind of like help you as you age, saying like, okay, as the nation gets older, we need to change things because society changes, right? Like a lot of different people can vote nowadays. Wasn't originally that way. It's not all about being able to own a bunch of property either. Like, guess what? Being white does not mean that you have rights over everybody else, or at least that's shouldn't be the case, right? So a lot of that changes when we introduce the amendments. The first 10 amendments are referred to as the Bill of Rights. It's not said the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, it's just 10 amendments. We refer to them as the Bill of Rights because of their impact on society. So today in this video, oh my gosh, it's going to take a hot minute. We're going to try to blip through all, not one, not 10, but all 27 amendments so that we have a better understanding of what it means. That also means I'm not reading these things word for word because like I'm not reading a bunch of old crusty writing from the 1700s because let's be real, it doesn't make sense to any of us. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. Okay, so let's begin with the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the one that you hear used the most. This is where you find the freedom of speech. It's where you find the freedom of religion. It's where you find the freedom of press and assembly and the right to petition the government, all right? So realistically, what it amounts to is this. The United States government is not going to support a specific religion. It's not going to support one at all. And it says all people are free to choose as they wish, whether they choose a religion, or whether they choose not to have a religion. It doesn't matter. We're not playing that game. Hi, France. Yeah. Okay, keep that in mind. Also, this is where you find journalism being protected with the freedom of press. Freedom of assembly, just think back to July in the streets of Kansas City. That's how you're able to legally do that, right? That's all protected. Along with being able to petition the government, just like the Declaration of Independence, we can make our own to our government, saying, hey, fix this crap. And finally, the freedom of speech. Now, understand this about the freedom of speech. Side note, caveat, focus, right there. The freedom of speech is given to all people. However, it can be restricted or taken away by the U.S. government. And there's two clauses that cause that to happen. One is called slander and the other is called libel. For example, if we're in a movie theater, 2020, if we're in a crowded movie theater, 1999 or 2019, any year that's not this year, and I suddenly decide to yell fire because I want to watch people lose their minds when watching some sappy romance movie to induce chaos so I can get out of that place, that's a violation. You're inciting panic by using your own words. That's a restriction. The other thing is this. I can't go to a newspaper, or at least I shouldn't. I shouldn't go to a newspaper and say, oh my gosh, my neighbor smells like a flaming pile of, yeah, when they really don't. By doing that, it's slandering them or it's hurting their name. Celebrities do this all the time. If somebody says something negative about a celebrity that isn't true, the celebrity turns around and sues the news agency that publishes it, okay? That's a protection of the First Amendment, right? Got it? Sweet. That took way too long. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. No, this is not the animals. No, it's not about this, right? No. This is the one where everyone goes, someone's going to take my gun. No, no one's going to take the gun. Now, understand this about the unique history of the right to bear arms. Other countries around the world look at us and scratch their head on that because they don't understand. Here's why they don't understand. The United States, after the Revolutionary War, keep in mind, didn't have an army, didn't have a navy, didn't have any of that. They had a militia of like volunteers in small towns that would grab their hunting rifles to defend an entire nation against, oh, I don't know, England Part 2. Meaning, the culture of the United States from the beginning is that we had to protect ourselves because we had no military to do it. So that's why it was very clear of like, hey, you have the right to own your own weapons to protect yourselves and your responsibility to protect this country. Flash forward to the present day, and we still adhere to that in the sake of individuals can own their own weapons, specifically arms, right? Cool. Second Amendment. Got it. Third Amendment. This is from the world of Boston. Remember, blame Boston for everything when it comes to the Revolutionary War. Yay. Presented to you by all those who don't like Boston. Ding. So, Third Amendment means this. The government can't put troops in your home. All right. Remember this from Boston Quartering Troop Act, the Quartering Act? Yeah, it was such a big deal at that point that it's now in our Constitution. Fourth Amendment. This one's super important. Individuals of law abiding. So think of like cops, for example. They cannot search your private property, aka your house, without a warrant. This is called search and seizure, right? It prevents the government from being able to do that. It requires the government to have a warrant by a judge and probable cause, right? Probable cause is kind of a foggy way to look at it, but like they have to have a means to have a warrant to be able to search your stuff. So what that means is this: in the event that somebody's at your house, a law officer of some sort, and they're sitting outside your door and we'd like to search your place without a warrant, you can gladly look at them and say, come back with a warrant and we'll talk. Otherwise, you don't have to let them in. Do note though, the minute you do let them in, that right has been revoked. Moving on, Fifth Amendment. This one's kind of loaded. There's two big things from this. One is the I plead the fifth that you find in all bad jury movies. This means people don't have to narc themselves out when testifying in court. All right. They don't have to give a testimony that's going to incriminate themselves. The other thing that it does, though, is it keeps the government from being able to take your private property without just compensation. For a lot of us watching this video, it doesn't really affect us. For a lot of us growing up in the middle of a farm, it's a really big deal. Remember, major highways get built, and when those highways are built, it's not just built on the concept of like, oh, there's a plot of land, put a road on it. This isn't SimCity, folks. That's farmland. So the government has to offer payment to the farmer saying the amount of crops that you'll have in X amount of years will be covered by this payment so that we can have this plot of land so that we can build a road for the betterment of the people. We call that eminent domain. We're not going to go a lot into that because this is 8th grade, but it's a really cool, fascinating topic. That's the Fifth Amendment. Sixth, you get a speedy trial by jury. All right. Other countries lose their minds because we have a jury and they don't understand that. The other thing is like, they're not going to put you in jail to just rot forever. You have to be in front of them pretty quickly. All right. It has to be fast. Seventh Amendment says all civil cases are to be tried by jury. That means even if it's a civil crime, so think of like shoplifting, for example, or anything you find on Judge Judy. Those kind of things, that still gets a jury, all right? And also remember this, once it's tried in front of a jury, the same case can't be tried twice, for better or worse. Eighth Amendment protects you from excessive bails, fines, and cruel and unusual punishment. We used to use the electric chair, ladies and gentlemen, for the death penalty. We stopped doing that because someone said they're still alive while they're roasting, and that's unfair and that is cruel. So they stopped. Eighth Amendment violation. Ninth Amendment is kind of the catch-all. It says anything else that's not described in this is implied that people have these rights anyway. It's one of the big things you'll never find in the Constitution. Right to privacy. Because of that, a lot of people say, well, it's not in the Constitution. A lot of other people use the Ninth Amendment of saying like that is what covers it because it's not explicit, but it's saying like the citizens should still be protected by the government. Duh. 10th Amendment says if it's not a U.S. Power, it's given to the state. Look at education. U.S. government does not control education. That is regulated by the states. All right. That's your first 10 amendments. That is the Bill of Rights. Whew. I'm at 9 minutes. Now we're going to move a little bit faster through the 11th through 27th. Ready? Okay. So 11th Amendment. Sets limits on when a state can be sued. That's important right now because Texas right now is in the middle of a lawsuit. In particular, it gives immunity to states from lawsuits from out-of-state citizens and foreigners not living within state borders, meaning somebody from Canada can't file a lawsuit against Kansas. That's just weird, and the government's like, no. 12th Amendment, revised presidential election procedures. It says, here's how we're going to elect people. It's not going to be a national popular vote, put in the Electoral College. And on top of that, the loser is not going to be the vice president because that was just different. 13th Amendment, this one is pretty big. This one abolished slavery. It's not pretty big. It's probably one of the biggest ones in there. It abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude. So also, please keep this in mind, not to put them all in the same perspective, but there are also individuals who were indebted to others that would work farms for people at this time, and they would never be paid for it, like they were indentured servants. So this eliminates that also. 14th Amendment, this is a big one. It defines on what it means to be a U.S. citizen. It prohibits states from reducing privilege of citizens and ensures that citizens the right to due process, equal protection of law. So it says this specifically, if you take these steps, this is what determines if you are a U.S. citizen versus everybody else in the world. Really big deal. That one was 1868, so we went like 100 years before we even figured that one out. 15th Amendment gave all men the right to vote regardless of race or color and whether or not they had been slaves or not. All right, this was passed in 1870. Please note, the important piece about this, two things. Well, one, all men were able to vote. The other piece about this is all men were able to vote. I'll let you figure out what's missing there, right? We'll move to it. 16th Amendment gave the federal government the power to collect income tax. All of us go, oh. 17th Amendment establishes that senators would be directly elected. So here's the thing. There was like a weird electoral college thing for senators and representatives in the different states. We changed that. It's now just like a popular vote. Who gets the most votes in the state, that's who becomes a senator. By the way, vote for me in 4 years. Woo! Next, 18th. This one's fun. In the early 1900s, we decided that alcohol was the reason that we sucked as a country. So what did we do? We banned it completely. In fact, we didn't just ban it, we put it in the Constitution. 18th Amendment is also known as prohibition, meaning that there could be no alcohol made, sold, distributed, or brought in or imported to the United States. That started in 1919. We'll revisit that in a moment. 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. So now, at this point in 1920, all people had the right to vote, regardless of race, regardless of gender. 20th Amendment gave details for a term of office of Congress and the president. Check this crazy thing out. So, one, George Washington ran for 2 terms, right? He was a 2-term president. Yay, Washington, right? And then he left because that's what presidents do, right? They can only run for 2 terms. Yeah. Not until 1933 was that even a law. So believe it or not, a president could run multiple terms after 2. It's just that everybody ran for 2 after Washington because he set the precedent. He said that this is what I'm going to do, so everyone followed suit with him, except FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He ran for 3 terms, died in term number 4. And after his death, they realized that's probably a bad idea. So now it's a term limit of 2. 21st Amendment. This is when we realized the 18th Amendment was a really bad idea. Bad on business. Repealed the 18th Amendment. That was prohibition. So now people can drink again. Yeah, next. 22nd. Limited the president's max to 2 terms or 10 years. Switch it with the 20th. My bad. 20th was terms for office of the president. 22nd, that was your 2 terms. My bad. Oops. 23rd. So the 23rd gives the Washington, D.C., so the District of Columbia. It's not a state, it's just a territory. It gives them a representative in the Electoral College for the presidential election. All right, that way they have a vote in the presidency. Because remember, if you're not in a state, you technically don't have the ability to vote. This gave D.C., the people living in Washington, D.C., the opportunity to vote. 24th, said people that don't pay taxes, you don't have to pay taxes at the poll. Believe it or not, once upon a time, because we're bad people, we would charge each other to go vote, and this was called discrimination. Yeah, we'd also ask them like U.S. history questions that no one would know because they weren't able to go to school. Yeah, dark times. Anyways, you can't stop someone from voting. That's all that matters there. 25th. This lined up the order of succession of something that should happen to the vice president. Just a few years prior to this being passed in 1967, one of our presidents, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated on television. It was very, very awkward, super uncomfortable, and kind of spun the U.S. in a little bit of a depression for a while. They decided at that point, you know, between that and the Cold War with Russia at the moment and nuclear weapons in the 1960s and no one really knows what's going on, we might want to have an order of what would happen if a president gets killed. So they made a full succession that goes from president to vice president all the way down to home and interior or something like that. I don't know. But there's like a list of like 12 or 14 people in the cabinet that can take over in the event that our government gets their head cut off by killing like a lot of people, right? The show Designated Survivor, great example of that. Designated Survivor is a real thing, by the way. Every time the president gives a State of the Union address, that was in the articles, by the way. Every time they give a State of the Union address, everybody in the government's there in that one building listening. There's somebody inside that line of succession that is hidden inside the United States in the event something happens to the State of the Union. Kind of cool. 26th Amendment, voting age, 18. It was originally 21. We dropped it. Now students can vote. And finally, the 27th, the most exciting amendment in the whole set of amendments is, and the most recent one to be passed, because it was passed in 1992, states that a congressional salary change cannot take effect until the beginning of the next session of Congress. So, pay raises for Congress people. It's pretty anticlimactic if you think about it. Yeah. Anywho, that is your 27 amendments. There's a lot of them, right? There's a lot to take apart. We focus a lot on the first 10, which makes a lot of sense and it's very important. However, really, the amendments after the first 10 really show the growth and evolution of the United States because they span the whole time of the United States, whereas the Bill of Rights were introduced because that is what the Federalists wanted inside the Constitution, right? And if I'm wrong, you're going to correct me. Anti-Federalists? Federalists? I'm so confused. I need a nap. Anywho, so there's your 27 amendments. Super important. Super important for you to know the amendments, not because of some test. That's stupid. Because as a citizen, you need to know. As a person who dwells within the United States, you need to know the amendments because they directly affect you on a daily basis. It's not just about the freedom of speech. That's cool. That's pretty awesome that we've got it. But there's so much more to how our government functions besides just that.